Yes, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, might I have Exhibit AZ brought up on the screen? Tab 1, please. Now, Ms Folbigg, I'd just like you to go to the third page of this document. Actually, go to the fourth, the entry for the fifth. Now, you'll see in this, you're familiar with this document, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And you'll see that there are a number of times that are set out on each of the pages in this document, which I understand in part involve, some of them are printed on the page, some of the times are printed on the page and some of them are placed there in your handwriting.
Yes.
And if we look at this document and go through it, we will see a number of entries as to volumes. So if we look at the fifth, for instance, 50 ml, that's 50 millimetres of milk given to the child. Is that correct? And then underneath that is water at 12 o'clock, you see that?
Yes.
And ENF, what's that mean?
Enfalac.
Enfalac. That was the formula that you were using. Yeah. And then a little bit below that, to the left of that column, at 1 a.m. it's got restless, and on the right-hand side, change nappy, etc. And are these the, if we go through the next few pages to the 6th and 7th, 8th and 9th, we can see there that there are entries made in your handwriting with various observations next to particular times. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it the case that those entries were made after you had attended to Caleb in some way?
Correct, yes.
Whether it be giving him something to eat, or changing a nappy, or making an observation about his state of health.
Yes.
And after you attended to him in some way, you then set about making an entry in the document.
Yes.
Right. And that was, if we look at this, we can see, and if we go through to the 15th or somewhere like that, we've got an entry underneath the number 15, Dad looking after Caleb, have everything ready. And if you see there to the right of that, there's 8:30, appointment hospital EEG. Does that mean that you had a hospital appointment at that time?
Yes.
And there are various entries with respect to whether he was awake or asleep, whether he was bathed or not.
Yes. Correct.
And this is a document, is it, that you prepared either at the time or shortly after Caleb was born?
Yes.
And to that extent, you went through this diary and filled out a good number of pages with a similar series of times.
Yes.
And if we go to the entry for the 20th and 21st, this is after Caleb's death.
Yes.
and we look at the next 8 or 10 pages out to the 27th of February, all these times were inserted by you,
Yes.
except that unfortunately Caleb died and you never got to fill them out. And it's the case, isn't it, that you, if we look at the 1st of March, you put in an entry 4 weeks, 1 month, which was 4 weeks after Caleb's death. After his birth. Now, Your Honour, there were 2 other pages which were provided to my friend as to subsequent entries which were peripherally relevant. I don't know whether they've been put up on the screen. They have? And this one of the 24th of May, 16 weeks, 4 months, that's something you would have put in at about the time that you put the other entries,
Yes.
other numbers in.
Yes, I was making sure that appointments were to be made.
And you make reference there to make appointment Dr. Heder, or is that Heder or
Yeah, I believe it's Eda, yeah.
booster for Caleb? And if we can go to the next one, please. 19th of July, booster for Caleb again. Is it the fact that when you set about putting these entries in, you were marking off in the diary events that were to happen into the future that you'd have to attend to
Yes.
in due course? Yes. And to that extent, you, sometime shortly after Caleb's birth, set to organise yourself to make sure that you had a good account of the attendances that you would make upon him and record it in this diary.
Yes.
And also to record important medical consultations which you knew would have to take place into the future for his health and benefit.
Yes.
And as I understand it, you took Caleb to a number of doctors during his short life, is that right?
Yeah. Paediatrician, yes.
Paediatrician, who was that?
Dr. Springthorpe.
And did you attend with Craig at that appointment, or was that something you did?
Something I did.
Okay. And you followed Dr. Springthorpe's advice?
Yes.
And indeed, just while we're on to medical attendances and consultations, with Patrick, before his incident on the 18th of October, you had taken him to a number of doctors' attendances, including GPs and paediatricians, is that correct?
Yes.
And after that incident, you attended, I mean, he was a very sick little boy after that, wasn't he?
Yes, it was.
And you had no hesitation, did you, in taking him to the hospital when he needed it, did you?
No.
Or take him to various medical attendances
No.
as and when necessary?
Yes.
And some of those attendances at hospital were with Craig in your presence,
Yes, I do.
and there are others were there where you attended by yourself.
Yes.
And with respect to other general practitioner appointments and so forth, you would take Patrick to those appointments by yourself,
Yes.
and on occasions with Craig as well.
Yes.
and of course, when Sarah was born, there were other assessments and so forth that took place with respect to her,
That's right, yes.
and you arranged many of those, didn't you?
I didn't arrange them, but yes, I would go to them. And
I
talk
see.
to them.
When you say you didn't arrange them, are you saying that your GP would arrange them? Okay. And the same with Laura. And that you ensured, as best you were able, I take it, that these children got whatever medical attention they needed from time to time. Is that correct?
Yes, of course.
And you followed advice from people from time to time. Okay. Now, you were asked some questions over the last couple of days about your diaries. I'd like to pull one up which is the 12th of July 1990 in Exhibit AZ. Okay, if we go to that one. And 12 July 1990, it seems that Craig has lost his job and he's got another job already, but you were seriously thinking about going back to work,
Yes,
and it was because money was tight, is that correct?
yes,
And at that time you were looking, or in the 3 months that followed that, can I suggest, and we can go to your diaries if you want to, but there were discussions that took place between you and Craig about whether you should stay where you were then living, or otherwise consider moving towns, basically. Do you have any recollection of that now?
sorry, I have no memory or recollection.
Okay. If we go to 23 July 1990, and if you just read the entries for 21, 22 and 23 to yourself that are on the screen. And let me know when you've finished reading that.
Yes, okay.
And if we look at that entry of the 23rd of July, one of the issues you were grappling with at that point was a potential move up to Hawk's Nest.
Yes,
And at about point 5 on the page, one of the concerns you had was that Patrick, who you're writing about, would end up growing up to be a Hawk's Nest boy instead of a Mayfield boy. He'd have ideal conditions during, I can't read that word. During
I'm not sure, summer, maybe?
summer, and well. Okay, and that was what you were thinking at the time.
Yes,
Now, I'd like to now take you to the entry for 20 September 1990.
August. Is that right?
Sorry, it might be 20 August. I'm sorry. I just want you to read that to yourself. Let me know when you've finished.
Yes, okay.
Now, can we take it that that was an entry that was made on or about the 20th of August 1990?
Yes,
And in that you were looking at making family decisions about where you'd live,
correct?
and that one of the considerations would be the impact on Pat's future if you moved away,
Yes,
and that one of the considerations you had at that time, that you were thinking about at that time, was that Melbourne has top schools and an educational system down there,
yes,
and that you should think about that.
yes, cool.
And that was it. Yeah, okay. The reason that I ask this is that you were asked some questions yesterday about a later diary entry taken some years after the event, in which you were lamenting that you were glad that you had made no plans for the future education of your children, and that being the case, would you agree that these entries that I've just shown you indicate that at the time you were writing these entries, you were actually making plans you were taking into account Patrick's future, in making your family decisions and discussing those with Craig?
Yes, at the time of writing that, yes.
Now, you were asked some questions about the giving of what they call an ERISP interview down at the police station.
Yes,
You were asked by the police to undergo an ERISP interview, and you were told it was voluntary,
yes,
and you agreed to go down and give that interview, didn't you?
yes, I did.
Voluntarily. Thank you. Now, there was some cross-examination, and Your Honour, I'll give you the references, about your approach to Sarah,
Yes,
right, and your emotional bonding with Sarah, and your connection with Sarah, and Your Honour's transcript page 662 and 663, 770 and 764 line 26. And I give those to Your Honour not to drag them up onto the screen, but for Your Honour's convenience. And it was suggested to you in broad terms at each of those places that one of the entries in your diary in which you compared Sarah with Laura was heartless, a heartless form of expression. It was also suggested to you that you were asked to comment on whether you had no bond with Sarah, or that otherwise you had been disparaging to Sarah. Now, did you love Sarah?
absolutely, yes.
And did you feel grief at her death?
Of course. Still feel it now, yes.
While we're at it, did you love Caleb and feel grief at his death?
Yes, of course.
And Patrick?
And Patrick, yes.
And Laura?
And Laura as well.
Your Honour, I'd like the witness to be shown Exhibit E, and it's Exhibit AM from the trial. Now, this is your handwriting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it is a letter from you to Craig, is it?
Yes.
And it's undated,
Yes.
from what we can see. I'd like you to, I'd like to suggest to you that this was written after the death of Sarah.
Yes, it was.
Do you have any recollection of this letter?
I had forgotten about writing this letter. I will admit that, yes.
Okay, well, can you just read the first line for us? Read it out loud, actually.
I have so many feelings and thoughts running around in my head, I can't discuss them with you.
Now, just stop there. It was a feature, wasn't it, that you would write to Craig sometimes?
Yes, yes.
You'd write letters to him rather than talk to him?
Yes.
And when you were writing letters, would you think about the subject matter of the letter before writing to him?
I will say sometimes,
Yeah.
and then other times I had a bit of paper in front of me and then would just start writing a letter.
So, go on with this letter.
The more I think of what our lives will be like, just you and me, the more I'm scared. I don't think that I could handle it. I clearly remember how close I got to leaving you before Sarah was born. I thought that having her would solve the problems. I was wrong. That was a mistake. She was by no means a mistake. I love her more than anything and wouldn't have had my life go in any other direction, and am proud and grateful for the happiness and joy that she did bring into my life. But she is gone. And sorry, it's just unclear from your screen.
I'll
there we go.
hand you a copy of it.
Yes, no, it's all right. I have a copy, so it's fine. Thank you. And I am now faced with all the feelings and thoughts that I had before, but worse. Having her solve the problem of fulfilling your life and making you happy with life again, but now because of cruel fate, all that's happened is turn your life into misery once more. How much misery and tragic deals of life can a couple supposed to bear? I suppose this last one has broken me. I don't know about you. You said this morning that you've made my life sad. That's not true. There always will be many memories of happiness. Unfortunately, they seem to be followed closely by ones of sadness. The bottom line is, I don't want this life anymore. I want to have a major change. Changing the car won't solve it. I can't live here. I hate it. It makes me miserable. And there's more. I just can't seem to find the words to explain. I think it's a case of this avenue of my life has expired. I can't find any other way to extend or repair or change it. The only two options I have left are try life on my own or die. My survival instinct is too high for option 2.
Now, I'll just stop you there. This was a letter, was it, that was written shortly after, or was it shortly after or long after Sarah's death?
No, it was quite soon after Sarah's death.
And it was written in the context of the grief you were feeling?
Yes.
And it's tough to say, but you'd had your third child die and you were struggling with where you were in the relationship. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honour, I see no need to read the balance of the letter. We can move on and the letter speaks for itself. I'd now like to take you back to Exhibit AZ. And to the entry for the 11th of June 1997. Now, can you find that for me in there? Now, just to remind you, and for Your Honour's convenience, it doesn't need to come up on the screen. This relates to some cross-examination at page 739 through to 740 in relation to that cross-examination by my learned friend Ms Caneen about the use of the expression lock me up and throw away the key.
Yes.
And you told His Honour that your reference to being locked up and throw away the key was due to mental illness concerns that you had.
Yes.
Could you just read for His Honour I understand it's on the next page. Just let's go through this entry. At the top, sad news for Craig, his dad and family, his grandma Gam died tonight.
Yes.
So it was in the context of a death in the family, right? And then you go on to say that Craig says she wasn't very special, but you were sure that he felt some sadness of some kind. And he said that he'd been thinking about it lately for some reason.
Yes. Yeah.
Just read on from there.
I think he has slight ability to foresee what's happened or going to happen. Wonder if he'll predict our coming birth in the same way. Interesting. Wish me keep.
Now, we don't need to go on to the next bit because that's a part of the document in which you shift from that thought to your dietary concerns, right? And of course, this was sometime around your birthday, wasn't it, this death?
Yes.
And if we go to the next page, in the bit where it it's on that same page. You then say, I know it's selfish thought, but why is it that something always seems to happen so that my birthday pales into insignificance? And I'd like you to read on from there, please. Read.
Oh, yep. Pales into non-existence and becomes less important. I'm 30 this year, another milestone age, and again I feel depressed and lonely and unacknowledged. I think it's because Mum and Dad now no longer acknowledge me on my birthdays, and it hurts. On my birthdays I have no family of my own that I really care about when I was born into this world, except for Craig, and this year it's now been marred by Gam's death.
On to the next page.
It will be interesting to see who remembers me and who doesn't. None of Craig's family will accept Dad and Mary, and they may still get upset over Gam's funeral to remember anyway. Be too upset, or too upset. Mel might remember. Work will probably let it slide. If it wasn't for my baby coming soon, I'd sit and wonder again what I was put on this earth for and what contribution I have made to anyone's life. Only person I think I've made a difference to is Craig, and times like this I can't do anything for him, so I fail there as well. 30 years, first 5 I don't really remember. Rest I don't choose to remember. Last 10 and 11 I have been filled with trauma and tragedy, happiness, mixed emotions of all designs. Maybe from now on I'll be able to settle a little, but no immediate future brings turmoil, happiness, sad memories, happy ones, depression and great pride. And it goes on. Life sucks. You can never figure it out. Is anyone meant to?
Right. And it's in that, and then the passage following that is the section about being locked up and throw away the key.
Yes.
All right. And then if we go down below that, you say, my problem is, and if you can just read that for us, please.
My problem is I'm feeling life... can't read my own writing. My problem is I'm feeling life an obscurity of non-existence, and it happens with every birthday. Damn, why have them?
And is it fair to say that on this day, when you made this entry, you were sitting there pondering your position on earth, what it's all about, and that maelstrom of emotions and difficulties you've had over all the years?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, Your Honour, this next document, I'd like, it's Exhibit 1 from the trial, and it's relevant to the cross-examination which took place yesterday at T644 line 45 and T773 line 35. We don't need the transcript, I'm just giving you Your Honour's reference. Is that Exhibit 1? Yeah, MFI 3. If we could go to that document, please, Your Honour. Now, this is another letter. It's in your handwriting, is it?
Yes, it is.
And it's a letter which is undated, I want to suggest, but I want to suggest it was written at about the time that it was written at a time when Laura was alive and you were struggling in your relationship with Craig, right? And I'd just like you to read it out for His Honour.
Craig. Yes, one of those letters, but we can't seem to communicate with each other in any other way. We have problems once they only pop up every now and then. Now they are a reoccurring nightmare. I don't know how to say what's in my heart and mind without hurting you, but I've decided I have to speak out anyway, and one of them is that you clam up, ponder, overanalyze, and then finally will speak. But by then it's too late. You were correct. I do seem to leave as soon as you are around. This will hurt, and all I can say is sorry. But over the years you have become an oppressive and depressing person. I only see sparks, and tiny ones at that. Sorry.
All right. Take your time.
Of the man that attracted me all those years ago. You now always seem to have a problem with and how your life is, or with me, and decisions I make, or with Laura. And even looking after her without me around is such a chore for you. I am now not prepared to handle or pamper or put up with it anymore. You're right. Last couple of months I've decided that more Laura than you will fit into my life, and what I want is to be and what I wish to do. Laura is only 18 months old. She goes where I want to go and not the other way round. If it's inconvenient to have her with me, then yes, I'll arrange for her to be cared for by someone else. By someone, I. Trust would care for her and watch over her till you return.
I'm sorry, till you return or till I return?
Till I return, sorry. If that's you, then so be it. You are her father, and some responsibility for her care is yours, not just financially. When she reaches an age where she can offer me a reasonable argument or alternative to coming with me, then hey, she'll be at this stage where she's capable of making her own decisions, as long as that decision makes basic sense. But even then, my life and day-to-day operation of it will not be compromised too much. You have not ever offered a single argument to change my mind about anything. I find lately that you have a problem, a major one, with me not depending on you so much anymore. Sure, financially I do, but now I see why you're really unsure about me returning to work. I take that last dependency string away. Sorry, but I've decided life's mine and is more than depending on someone to get me by. I've been thinking it a lot lately, months. We're not happy. All right, I'm not happy. And yes, it's not happy with you and our lack of relationship. I've tried. You've no idea how hard. You don't see it. I have been kidding myself that Laura makes the difference she does. She's what's holding me here and to you. But life could be different. She wouldn't suffer as long as both parents love and cherish her, even if they are apart. Here is what I have thought of doing. Once working, I was going to see if a separation, amicable and friendly if possible, could be managed. It would mean me and Laura moving out, but she would have no less than she does now, and really life wouldn't be all that different for her as long as you and I can still get on as friends. Access to your daughter would never be an issue. You could see her every day, pretty much as you do now. Once older, you could probably even have her for a week or more at a time. I like to think that we'd still be family unit and do things with her as one. But how much longer can you and I go on like this? I still love you, but it has changed a lot. I don't think it's as my husband or lover anymore. More like my oldest and dearest friend in the world. It's deep, but it's not the right kind. I'm sorry. I have thought back to when I truly felt like this. I was probably when I made the decision to have Laura. It worked for a while, and it disguised and hid them for quite a while. It was the wrong decision back then, but now I have her, there's no question it was right. I'm sorry. Can you go on with me in this present state? Can you continue life as this? Is it right for Laura to believe in such a fantasy of life between you and me? I feel and believe if we do this now, before she's too much older, she'll adjust and learn that it's okay. Her life is just as rich and full as any others, but just a minor detail. Her parents don't live together anymore. Sorry, Kathy. Write or talk.
Now, in that letter, in your diary, you talked about leaving Laura with Craig and separating, correct?
Yes?
And here in this letter, you're talking about separating from Craig and taking Laura with you.
Yes?
I mean, it's a sad situation, but the relationship was struggling for whatever reason.
Yes.
But is it fair to say that your views about this, well, it was a traumatic time in your life to make this decision,
Yes, of course.
and your views about how to do it changed from time to time,
Yes.
and you were never exactly clear as to the best way of dealing with it.
No, I was confused quite a lot.
And you were struggling with the, I'm sorry, I'm told there's another page to that letter, Your Honour. Yeah, I'm sorry, before we conclude, if you just read that last bit, please.
Yes, Craig, what you make of your life and the sort of person you end up becoming is your choice, no one else, and your responsibility. I will not tolerate you saying or believing that my choices for me affect your work or social outlook on life. You are responsible for you and your daughter, as I am for me and Laura. Also, food for thought.
Thank you. But it's the case that you were struggling with strain in the marriage and you were trying to find a solution, and you changed from time to time.
Yes, as I said, I was always confused and not sure how to handle things.
And you were, is one of the things that you were concerned about is what was best for Laura, whether Laura would be best off with Craig or Laura would be best off with you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing is that you were asked questions about was you had a view that your view had an impact, that your mood, I'll withdraw that. You told His Honour over the last couple of days that you had a view that your mood would impact upon others, including your children.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
From the basis of my own upbringing.
Tell His Honour about it. What happened?
Your Honour, my own upbringing was, if I, even as a child, if my mood affected my mother, there was a response to that. There was a consequence to that. So I therefore grew up believing that that I had to always keep any negative or emotions or moods in check because I didn't wish them to inflict on other people, and I never wanted to burden other people. And I had learnt that if I did so, there was always a consequence of some sort to that.
Now, just by way of background, you left school before completing your HSC.
Yes, I did.
Did you leave in year, well, I think it was probably fifth form, sixth form in those days, but using modern parlance, was it?
Halfway through year 11. Yeah.
Okay, right. And the other thing is that certain propositions were put to you that the purpose of your diaries, which we've been through over the last couple of days, was for you to vent your frustrations.
Yes.
Right? Was that the only purpose for your diaries?
The purpose of my diaries was, for me, was to, since I didn't share my emotions or my feelings with people, the diaries became where I shared them and where I put them.
And it's the case, isn't it, that there are other things than just emotions. There are life events and all sorts of other things in your diary.
Yes.
And if we go through them and read them, we can work out where you've recorded a life event, like Gam's
Yes.
death,
Yes.
right? But then your emotional response to that.
Yes.
Okay. Just excuse me a moment. No, thank you, Honour.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honour. Yes. Ms Folbigg, just taking up that last question that you were asked in relation to when you left school, you remember having one or more sessions with Dr. Diamond?
Yes.
He's a psychiatrist, isn't he?
Yes.
And he assessed you at the request of your lawyers.
Yes.
And he has written a report about his assessment. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have.
And is that accurate insofar as it describes what you told him?
Yes?
He records that you attended a public high school from year 7 until 6 months short of completing your HSC in year 12.
Oh, okay, yes.
You accept that? And that it was in the context of a breakdown of the relationship with your mother.
Yes.
It wasn't in relation to your educational achievements.
No.
Thank you. Now, Ms Folbigg, you've given a deal of evidence over the last couple of days about what you say you meant by various diary entries. That's right. Is the evidence you have given evidence as to your recollection today as to what you meant, or is it your recollection based on what you meant at the time you wrote them?
Recollection of what I felt I meant at the time as I was writing them.
Now, there have been serious and significant events that have occurred since you wrote in the diaries, that's right, isn't it?
Yes?
Particularly in relation to the 96 to 98 diaries, which you were taken to in great detail yesterday.
Yes?
The first most significant event was, of course, that Laura died,
Yes?
and that was the death of your fourth child.
Yes?
And the second significant event was that you were charged, tried and then convicted of killing each of your children and harming Patrick.
Yes?
And then you have been in jail for some 15 years as a result of that.
Yes?
And that you understand that part of the case against you was in relation to an interpretation of your diaries.
Yes?
And in more recent times, you have, through those who have assisted you, sought to have a judicial inquiry into your guilt.
Yes?
And that's why we're all here today, isn't it, Ms Folbigg?
It is.
Now, you've had 15 years to think about the diaries, haven't you?
15 years to think about. Yes, correct. Yes, I've had 15 years.
How long have you had a copy of the diaries to read?
Approximately, I'm not going to say exactly how long, but I'm probably only saying a month, 2 at the most.
So you didn't have access to them while you were in jail, while the various appeals were going on?
No, I didn't.
And do you say that you had access to them in relation to these proceedings?
Yes.
And they were provided to you by whom?
My team, my legal, yes.
And you think that was 1 or 2 months ago?
As far as I'm remembering, yes.
You were provided with all of the diary entries that have been before His Honour?
What is in front of me at the moment that's been tendered, yes.
So the entries that you've been taken to over the last couple of days have been available to you for a month or two to read?
Yes.
And you have no doubt read them carefully?
Yes.
Be fair to say you've probably pored over them. Is that right, Ms Folbigg?
Yes.
And in poring over the diary entries, you have done so bearing in mind all of the events that have occurred since you wrote them. Is that right?
No, as I was reading the diaries, I was reading what is in front of me, not really taking into account anything else.
Can I suggest, Ms Folbigg, it would be almost impossible for you to read and give evidence about those diaries today without being affected by those significant events that you agreed before had occurred. Is that right?
Okay, yes, I'll agree.
It's inevitable that there's some element of reconstruction given the passage of time and the significant events that have occurred. Is that right?
No, I don't believe that I've reconstructed anything. I believe I've read the diaries, tried to put my mind back to what it was I was feeling and the emotion behind what I'm reading, and I'm attempting to explain what it is that I've put in those pages.
I'm not suggesting that you haven't tried to do that, Ms Folbigg. I'm suggesting that it's almost impossible for you to have actually achieved that, given the significant events that have intervened. You accept that?
I'm not sure I do. You've asked me have I read the diaries. I'm saying yes. I'm saying I read the diaries as a separate thing. Okay, I may be in prison for the fact that these diaries were used. Did that have an influence in any way? Only in the respect that I'm now trying to answer what everyone has been wanting to know, and trying to help Your Honour in this inquiry.
And you're trying to help His Honour, as you say, in the inquiry, because the purpose of the inquiry is to consider the evidence that was against you in 2003, isn't it?
Yes.
And the evidence you are giving now is in the context of His Honour having to form a view as to your guilt based in part upon what was said in the diaries. That's right?
It was a major part of how my guilt was decided, so yes.
And I'm suggesting to you that the evidence that you've given over the last couple of days as to what you say you meant at the time you wrote those diaries has been clearly affected by the significant events that have taken place since you wrote those diaries. That's right, isn't it?
I wouldn't say, no, I'm not going to agree, because we're reading the emotions behind what's in my diaries. I have admitted, even whilst testifying, that there are times when I'm not even remembering certain things that I've written in those diaries.
And you're not remembering them as you sit here now.
Well, even this letter that's just been presented, I had said to my own team, I actually had forgotten that I'd even written that letter.
So what you're doing when you're giving evidence about that letter now is, as you sit here, what you can remember today that you were feeling and meant when you wrote that letter to Craig. That's right, isn't it?
It's what it helped me, as a trigger, recall what I was feeling and remembering at the time when I wrote the letter.
It's human nature, isn't it, Ms Folbigg, to sit here now and give evidence taking into account all the events that have happened since you wrote them.
My mind doesn't work that way.
Are you suggesting then that you have been entirely unaffected by the circumstances in which you are here today and the events that have occurred since 2003 in giving evidence as to what you meant in the late 90s?
Oh, I won't say I've been entirely unaffected by it. You couldn't possibly be unaffected by something like this. What I am saying is these diaries and the extracts that have been constantly, and this is also the extracts that were used in my trial have the extracts and the diary entries that everybody is always constantly talking about. I have been reminded of those for all the time that I've been in prison. But as I said, I didn't actually get to read them myself again until it was presented to me to do so. And when presented with something that can trigger a memory as such, then yes, I'm sitting there in the moment thinking to myself, okay, why have I written this? Maybe I can help explain why I've written this. Because the problem that I felt that landed me in the position that I'm in is assumptions being made and things being taken out of context and nobody understanding what it was I was trying to say when I was writing these diaries.
And what you have done over the last couple of days is to give an account as to what you meant when you made those various diary entries.
Yes.
And I'm suggesting that the account you have given has been so coloured by the events that have occurred since they were written that your evidence must be considered in that light. What do you say to that?
No, I'm not going to agree with that.
You don't agree? So the evidence that you've given in relation to Laura, for example, in the later diaries, was given on the basis that when you wrote those diaries entries, Laura was alive. That's right?
Yes.
And the fact that she subsequently died after most of those entries were written didn't affect the way in which you interpreted what you had said in the diaries. Is that right?
No.
Well, you tell me.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what it is you're trying to... I'd also lost Caleb, Patrick and Laura, Caleb, Patrick and Sarah, and had written diaries in reference to Sarah as well. And Yeah, I'm not quite understanding what it is you're trying to...
Well, the diary entries that you were taken to yesterday primarily concerned the period of time before Laura died. That's right.
Yes, okay.
And you know, and we all know, that Laura died.
Yes,
And I'm suggesting to you, in the evidence you've given in relation to those diary entries and what they meant, has been affected by the fact that we all now know that Laura died. Accept that?
are you trying... I'm sorry, I'm still not...
I'm not trying to do anything, Ms. Folbigg. I'm asking you a question.
I know, but I'm not sure what the question is you're asking me. Are you asking me that Laura's dying changed how I wrote, or are you saying that Laura's dying affected how I'm perceiving things?
I'm suggesting to you that you have taken into account the fact that Laura died in how you have given evidence interpreting what your diary was saying before she died. Do you understand that?
Oh, okay, no. When I was giving evidence in reference when Laura's alive, that's the evidence of which I'm giving. I'm giving evidence as to my thoughts and feelings and what I thought it meant when I was writing things as to when Laura's alive. The same as if after she died, then I'm then looking at the entries and going, okay, yes, the effect is Laura's died. I'm then looking at these entries and going, now I need to help understand and explain why I was writing this sort of thing after she's died. I separated the two. There was no...
So you're saying to His Honour that you were able to and did, when giving evidence over the last couple of days about your diary entries, completely put out of your mind all the significant events that have happened since you wrote them. Is that right?
Basically, yes.
Now, you've given some evidence yesterday about what you meant by various words.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure you'll be pleased, and no doubt everyone else will be, when I say I'm not going to take you back to those entries, Ms. Folbigg. However, you gave evidence that you meant similar things by different words. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So, for example, words like frustrated, angry, terrible, cruel, all meant more or less the same things.
Yes.
Now, you understand again that His Honour's task is to look afresh at the evidence which includes your diary entries. You understand that?
Yes.
And part of that task is to look at what the entries mean.
Yes.
Now, you accept that the ordinary, plain meaning of those words which you have put together can objectively be seen as different. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
You accept that?
Yes, but I'm also was trying to explain that at the time of writing my diaries, in the use of those words, that's not how my mind worked.
I understand that, and I'm not revisiting the evidence you've given as to what you meant by each of those entries. I'm asking whether you accept, and I think you do, that objectively looking at those various words, they, by their ordinary meaning, have in fact different meanings. You accept that?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, can I take you to the chronology in relation to the diaries? And I'm hoping, Ms. Folbigg, you'll be able to help the inquiry understand the chronology of events. Now, some of this you may know and some of this you may not know. Are you aware that your husband, your then husband, Mr. Folbigg, gave to the police your 1989 diary and your 1996-97 diaries on the 19th of May 1999? Do you know that?
Yes.
And I take it then you also know that he read at least one of those diaries, probably the later one, earlier that month. You know that as well?
I've assumed he read them, yes.
Now, he told you that he had given the police those diaries, didn't he?
Yes.
And he told you that he had given the police those diaries around about or soon after the time he gave them. Is that right?
I can't clearly recall. I remember him telling me that he'd given them to me, but not details.
Not the details of
Not
when.
details, no.
Now, you were interviewed by the police on the 23rd of July that year,
Yes,
and before the interview, you knew that Craig had given the police at least one of those diaries,
yes,
which means that you were told somewhere between 19th of May and the 23rd of July.
yes,
Now, the interview with the police took place pretty much the entire day of the 23rd of July, didn't it?
yes,
And as my learned friend has said to you, you agreed to participate in that interview.
yes,
Now, after the interview, 2 search warrants were executed, weren't they?
yes,
The first one was executed on your apartment where you were living after you'd separated from your husband.
yes,
And on that occasion, the police seized the 1997-1998 diary. That's right?
yes,
And on that occasion, I think you also gave them a 1999 diary. Is that right?
I don't remember.
I'm sorry?
I'm not recalling, I don't remember.
Now, there was a second search warrant on that evening too, was there not, in the former matrimonial home?
Yes,
Now, I think, and I withdraw what I said before, I think it was at the search warrant of the former matrimonial home that your 1997-98 diary was found, is that right?
yes,
And that was found in a wardrobe.
yes,
And it was on that occasion that you gave them the 1999 diary.
as I said, I'm not remembering actually giving them the diary, but just they did end up with one.
So that's the broad chronology of how the police came to have in their possession those diaries.
Yes,
And you understand that subsequently in 2001 or 2, your former husband found some other diaries which he gave the police.
yes,
You understand that? Now, you gave evidence on Monday that you remember disposing of one diary,
yes,
and that's still the case?
yes,
Only one.
yes, that's the only memory I have of getting rid of one.
Now, you know that you told the police that you had gotten rid of more than one, don't you?
It's in the transcript that I said that, yes.
Yeah. So where does the truth lie?
That I'm only remembering actually just getting rid of one, and that was the one on Mother's Day.
Can you help us with why you told the police something different?
No? I don't know.
I beg your pardon?
I don't know.
I think it was put to you on Monday that your recollection would probably be better then than now, and I think you didn't accept that. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
It's a fairly obvious common sense issue, isn't it, Ms Folbigg, that you tend to remember better closer to the time of the event than you do years later.
Okay, yes,
Given that, it's more likely, isn't it, that what you told the police back in 1999 about events around that time is more likely to be accurate.
okay, concede, yes.
Now, on Monday, Mr Maxwell took you through the years of the diaries that were found and have been before this inquiry, and it was clear that there were some years missing.
Yes,
And your evidence is that you've been writing in diaries for decades,
correct.
and you'd expect there to be a diary, at least part of a diary for most years, is that right?
Yes,
So there are various diaries that have gone.
yes.
And can you help us with the diaries that you say you got rid of, from what years they were?
No, I can't help you with that at all. I'm not recalling. As I said, I remember getting rid of the one, and that was the Mother's Day, one of the very last ones I wrote. But I'm not recalling, so I can't help you with what happened to the others.
So when you say it was the one you wrote, are you saying that the diary, the one diary you have said here that you got rid of was a current diary. Is that what you're saying?
It was one that I'd had one I was writing in at the time, yes.
So that makes it a May 1999 diary,
Yes?
and it could have extended back to 1998.
Well, I don't remember. It could have, yes.
Well, let's come to then what happened to that diary or the 3 or more diaries that you told the police about. And perhaps if we can have on the screen that part of your ERISP that begins at question 459. Now, I take it you've had access to this document for some months as well, or 1 to 2 months, is that right?
It was in the same package, yes.
Thank you. Now, question 459 is on the left-hand page, and you've been taken to this before, but if you wish to read it again to yourself, please do so. Have you read that?
Yes.
So you've told the police that it was Mother's Day this year, and I think that was the 9th of May that year, wasn't it? You accept that?
Yes.
That you decided not to write in them anymore, and you've been asked a lot of questions about whether you wrote in them subsequently, and I'm not proposing to revisit any of that evidence. And then you say, this is the second last sentence and line, I just got rid of them all. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, by them all, I think you'd indicated earlier to the police there was about 3 of them, so let's stick with 3 for the moment. And you say that they were thrown away in a bin, probably dumped by now as far as I know, and that it was Andrew Street, and you say it's this Mother's Day just gone. So is your evidence today that you threw away or got rid of those diaries on Mother's Day, the 9th of May 1999? Is that how we're to read that?
Reading that, yes. But as I said, I'm still sitting here now only remembering just throwing one.
Yeah, but you understand you told the police
Yes,
there was
I
more than
understand
one.
that I told them, yes.
You couldn't help us with the year of... I withdraw that. You've said that the one that you got rid of was one that was in May 1999 and presumably went back before then. Are you able to help us with, assuming you got rid of more than one, what years they might have covered?
No, can't help with that.
Now, if we can just go to question 862. Now that's at the end of the page. Now you were asked there, did you destroy or throw the diaries away after Craig had told you that he had given the police a diary? Now just stopping there, did you?
No. Oh. Other than the ones that have been referenced in this ERIS, no.
What are you talking about when you're talking about the others that have been referenced in the ERIS?
You know, reading the ERIS, just, you know, we're now talking about that I may have just gotten rid of 3. You're saying 3. I'm saying I only remember 1.
Mm-hmm.
But my evidence was also that I'd also changed my mind and then just decided to start writing in diaries again. and I'm saying no, there was no attempt of me getting rid of those.
So, coming back to this question, Craig told you that he had given the police one of your diaries,
Yes?
and your information that you provided the police was that you had thrown away one or more diaries before Craig told you that he'd given a diary to the police, is that right?
Yes.
It's more likely, isn't it, that you threw it away after you heard that Craig had given a diary to the police, isn't it?
No?
Well,
See, I'm not... At that time, when Craig told me he'd given them a diary, I didn't like that he had, but I hadn't placed too much importance on the fact that he did, because I wasn't thinking there was anything in them that I had to be highly concerned about.
well, they were private.
Yes, other than that, as I said, I didn't like the fact that he did because they're private, but once it's done, what am I supposed to do about that? I couldn't do anything about that.
Well, you couldn't do anything about that diary, but you could do something about other diaries, couldn't you?
That was never my intention. But to me, the diaries were not that important as in information-wise, and they didn't concern me in any way that, okay, he's handed this diary over, you know, there was no conscious thought from me to go, right, that's it, I've got to get rid of everything.
But you did get rid of everything, didn't you?
Well, obviously I didn't, because there were other diaries that were handed in and found.
So you didn't successfully get rid of everything.
I'm not going to agree to that. There was no intent of me to get rid of anything.
Now, the police had a listening device at your house, didn't they?
Yes.
And perhaps if I can have up tab 18. Now, you've been taken to this before. You see it's dated the 24th of July,
Yes.
and that is the day after your interview with police.
Yes.
The interview with police finished 5 or 6 in the evening,
Yeah, I have no memory, but yes.
and you went home after that.
Yes.
And this is at 7:53 the next morning. You see that? And what appears on this is commentary by the police. You understand that?
Yes.
So the police are saying you entered the bedroom and appeared to open a cupboard or drawer, causing a loud noise. You accept that they could have heard that on the device, don't you?
Yes.
And then you're recorded saying, I should have fucking done that, what I was going to do, stuck it underneath that. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you've given evidence that you don't remember what that's about.
No.
Now, you asked questions, obviously, about the diary in your ERISP interview.
Yes.
And this seems to be suggesting that by the police, they thought that you were talking about the diary the police found during the search warrant. See that?
Yeah, that's what the police are thinking, yeah.
And that belief is one that's not unreasonable, given where they found the diary at the search warrant on the night before.
Object. It's not for this witness to comment, Your Honour, on a statement by the police to that effect, with respect.
My question, Your Honour, was whether Ms Folbigg agreed that it wasn't an unreasonable belief that, and I was going to continue but didn't.
I'll press the objection. That part of the question of itself is not a proper question with respect.
You said you were going on with something else?
Yes, Your Honour, perhaps if I can indicate the question and Your Honour can the question is that it's not an unreasonable belief that could be formed that that comment that's recorded there was about the diary the police found during the search warrant the night before.
I press the
I'll
objection.
allow the objection. I don't think that this witness should be asked that.
Thank you. Now, having thought about this matter in the last couple of days since you were asked questions about it, do you now have any recollection as to what it was about?
No, not at all.
Do you say that it could not be about the diary?
I'm saying I can't comment either way because I'm not having a recollection of anything.
So you don't remember either way?
No,
Could have been about the diary, could have been about something else.
it's been totally about something else.
Now, can I just go to tab 16? Now, this is the transcript of the same listening device, but you see this is the 23rd of July at 21:40.
Yes?
So that's the night after the interview, or the night of the interview.
I don't know.
Well, if the interview with the police was on the 23rd of July, this is the same day but the evening of the interview. And it's after the search warrant was executed.
Yeah.
That's right. And the conversation that's recorded there, you don't doubt, I take it, that that is a faithful recording of what was recorded in the listening device on the basis that you didn't doubt the previous one that was shown to you?
Object to this, Your Honour. There's a High Court case, Butera, which demonstrates that it's the tape itself that's the evidence, not the transcript. And you'll see from this document that there's a whole, what appears to be areas which either cannot be transcribed or are unknown. And, Your Honour, I take the objection. And it's relevant to that question, Your Honour.
It might be so, Mr Morris, depending on what the witness says. I mean, the witness might or might not accept that the words were said.
Your Honour, this is an event which occurred 30 years ago.
The witness has remembered lots of other events that occurred 30 years ago with what are said to be remarkable clarity. I'll allow the question.
I please the Court.
You accept, don't you, Ms Folbigg, that if the police have recorded this and transcribed it, that this is what you and Craig said on that date at that time?
Basically, yes.
Thank you. Now, it's recorded as Craig saying, I came home to get the diary and take it back to work and I couldn't find it. You see that? And then you saying, ... so clearly something preceded these words. I couldn't find it and they found it, ... and I've gone, I didn't have it, so ... Now, that's clearly in relation to a diary, isn't it?
Yes?
And it's in relation to the diary that was seized that night. Is that right?
Yes?
And I think that was the 97-98 diary, wasn't it?
I'm not sure. Yes.
And from what you have said there, you were aware, were you, that that diary was in existence prior to the warrant?
No. I'm looking at that, there's quite a bit of my part of the conversation that seems to be missing. Whether I was aware of the diary or not, it's not clear there.
Well, you tell His Honour what you say that extract means.
I'm reading this, Your Honour, and it's Craig that came to get the diary and take it somewhere, and I'm merely saying that I couldn't find it and then that the police have found it. And then that's all I can say to it as I'm reading it.
So, do you accept that the words that are recorded there indicate that you knew of the existence of the diary beforehand? That is, before the police found it at the search warrant?
Yes, because Craig had already told me that he'd handed a diary in. I am assuming that there may have been others around the house.
So you understand that this isn't the diary that Craig told you about because he'd given it to the police, clearly.
Yes, yeah,
So you're assuming that there were other diaries around the house that were able to be found, is that right?
yes.
And did you tell that to the police, or did you tell the police that there weren't any more?
I don't recall.
Sorry?
I don't recall. No.
Well, we'll have a look at what you told the police, if we can then have the heiress back up. Now, I think you had a conversation with the police at the house when they executed the warrant, and the police have given evidence about that. You familiar with that?
Not familiar, no.
Now, after this occasion, that is what's recorded on this listening device transcript, did you locate any other diaries?
I don't remember.
You don't remember? Thank you. Now, can I come to some evidence that you gave yesterday? Now, when answering a question put by His Honour, and this is at transcript 752, you were asked whether or not you believed there was some supernatural power. Now, this is 752 of the evidence that was given yesterday. If we can just have that on the screen. And you say, you were asked the question there at about line 28. Are you saying that you believe there was some supernatural power that took the other 3 children away from you, and you were concerned that the same supernatural power would take Laura away? And you answered yes. Now, is that a belief that you had when you wrote that entry in the diary?
Yes, I took Your Honour questioning me about that as trying to understand what it is the message I'm trying to get out and across, which was my belief of a higher power, be that God, Mother Nature, fate, destiny, karma, all of those things, metaphysical combined. And when Your Honour said the word supernatural, I agreed that it's along the basis of the thinking that I had at the time, yes.
And is that the view that you hold today, that some supernatural power took your first 3 children away?
Yes,
You hold that view today?
yes. I have no answers as to why I have survived my children and outlived my children. I was constantly trying to search for that answer.
But you can understand that there is a difference between not having any answers and coming upon as an answer a supernatural power.
As Your Honour was trying to, I thought Your Honour was trying to understand the meaning of what I was trying to get across. The word supernatural, I'm certainly not saying some ghost or entity or whatever came down and took my children. I'm saying that it follows along as a basis of trying to put together all of the mystical and spiritual beliefs I had at the time and I still have now.
So you still hold the view that there's some supernatural power took all of your children, or just the first 3?
No, all of them.
It took Laura as well?
Yes.
And you also gave evidence of your beliefs that the children who had died communicated with Laura, who was then alive, and warned her as to how she should behave. Do you remember giving evidence to that effect yesterday?
Yes.
And is it the case that today you believe that that occurred?
Yes, still believe that, yes.
You believe that they warned their sister to be good, or else you might crack it, or some other expression that you used?
I believed and believe that, how do I explain this? Being brought up on the faith and the Christian-based belief that I had when I was growing up as a child, I've always believed in once you've died, your spirit rests or goes to another place or is at peace. I've always believed that when it came to my children, it turned out to be a necessary belief for me that they could speak to each other, or that they were peaceful, or they were happy. And when I was pregnant with Laura, I believed that it was possible that the spirits of my children could have spoken to my child, and they had discussions about things.
So in relation to those two matters, the belief that you had then, as reflected in your diaries, is the same as the belief you have now. That's
Yes,
right.
that hasn't changed.
Is there any other aspect of the diaries that you have a view now that is different from the view that you expressed back in the late 90s?
I don't think so. I'm not foreseeing my core beliefs are my core beliefs.
I'm not talking about your core beliefs, I'm talking about whether or not you have a view now that's different from what was expressed in your diaries back in the 1990s.
No?
You don't? Is that a convenient time, Your Honour?
Yes, certainly. We'll adjourn for 20 minutes.
walking towards. Thank you, Your Honour. Ms Folbigg, I asked you questions earlier in relation to the diaries that were located by the police and others, and diaries that were not found. And I think you indicated that you had kept diaries off and on for decades. That's right?
Yes.
Has there been any pattern, particularly over the 90s, the period of the 90s and late 80s, that you have followed in terms of retaining or getting rid of diaries?
No, no pattern at all.
So on what basis have you made decisions over that period of time to either retain or get rid of a diary?
On the basis that once I'd finished with a book, it became irrelevant and I moved on to another one.
There must have been other reasons, however, because we had those entries in relation to Caleb that my learned friend took you to this morning.
Yes.
So there were reasons other than having finished a diary, clearly.
Yes, okay, yes.
What other reasons?
If it was important to me to keep, as in that particular journal with Caleb, it was one of the few things I had that it was in relation to him. So, yes, it was kept.
The 96-97 diary, that was kept beyond its life.
The 96 and 97 one, I have no recollection of what I've actually done with that, whether it's just misplaced or moved it about the house or did whatever I've done with it. So,
And what about the 97-98 diary?
and the same with that one.
And I think you gave the police a 1999 diary, didn't you?
I'm not remembering giving it, but yes, if they say I did, then yes.
Because you started one in 1999, didn't you?
Yes.
And I think a 1992 diary was found at some stage too, wasn't it?
Yes.
So you kept that for a reason that you can now tell us?
Not that I recall a specific reason, no.
Now, after the trial and as part of the sentencing process, you spoke with Dr. Westmore.
Yes?
Did you talk to Dr. Westmore about the diaries
Not in depth, no.
at all?
Not that I'm remembering, no.
You don't recall whether he took you through or asked you about any of the diary entries?
No.
Dr. Jafrida was also a doctor you spoke with in the context of your sentence. Do you remember that?
Yes?
Did he go through any of the diaries with you?
No. As I understood it, his wishing to speak to me was through the prison. That's where he was and where I spoke to him. And it was explained to me that he was merely speaking to me so that he could do a report in regards of my sentencing.
Now, Dr. Diamond, who you met with more recently,
Yes.
did he take you through any of the diaries?
No, he didn't.
Did you talk to him about what any of the diaries meant?
No.
He didn't tell you what he thought about any of the diary entries?
No, he informed me that he wasn't actually interested in the diaries as such and therefore wouldn't be asking me questions about them.
So coming back to Dr. Westmore, he saw you, I think, on behalf of the Crown, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
And you don't recall him talking you through the diary entries?
No.
The defence, I think.
I beg your pardon?
Westmore was engaged by the defence, I think.
Was he?
Is it not right?
I don't know. I'm happy to accept that if that's the case.
Yes, legal aid request.
Oh, he was legal aid. So yes, I apologise. I take that back. He was by the defence. Now, have you read his report recently?
Dr. Westmore's?
Yes.
No.
And if he said in his report that he talked to you about the diaries, you'd accept that to be true, I take it?
Yes?
Yeah. I'll subsequently be tendering this, Your Honour, but on page 2 of his report dated the 16th of June 2003, he records in his report, I then indicated to her, that's you, that the diary entries do suggest that at times she wasn't really coping with the children. And then you responded, I've always admitted that at times I wasn't coping. And then he made a suggestion about the diary entries. So does that help you recall talking to him about the diary entries?
Not really, no.
Has there been any other health professional that you have spoken to about your diary entries since 2003?
No,
Have you spoken to anyone else? Other than your lawyers, I mean?
no.
No?
Other than dear closest friends, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, I have nothing further.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that completes the evidence of the witness. Now, are there any other matters that need to be attended to in terms of tendering?
There are, Your Honour, but not necessarily in the presence of the witness.
Yes.
Or it can be done in the presence of the witness, Your Honour, but I anticipate my friend has an application to make in relation to Dr. Diamond's report in Your Honour's hands as to whether you...
What do you say about it, Mr. Morris? Do you need the witness to be here?
I don't think, well,
Do you want the witness to be here, I suppose?
well, the fact of the matter is, Your Honour, in the past she's been able to be here via telephone
Yes.
link through the prison, so I suppose really as a matter of formality she's entitled to be here and I've got no reason to exclude her.
Okay, well, we'll leave the witness here and proceed.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, you'll be aware that a report was provided by Dr. Michael Diamond to those instructing my learned friend, and you'll recall, Your Honour, that it was raised some weeks back, at which point I had not had a chance to read it, but in the circumstances I would ask that this inquiry accept the report of Michael Diamond dated 16 April 2019.
What's your attitude about it?
Your Honour, Dr. Diamond's report considers the reports of Dr. Skinner, which was relevant to the sentencing, as well as Dr. Westmore and Dr. Jafrida, and comes to views that are either similar to or in some respects dissimilar to, and also considers the report of a Dr. Betts. And Your Honour might recall that either associated with or attached to Professor Cordner's report, which was associated with the petition, was a report of Dr. Betts. That report wasn't tendered when all the other reports were tendered because of the scope and purpose at the time. Your Honour will recall that it was not known then whether Ms Folbigg would give evidence, and therefore the diaries were not part of the scope. Her report wasn't tendered, and Your Honour, I don't propose to tender that report. The author didn't meet with Ms Folbigg, and matters have gone considerably past that, particularly in relation to Dr. Diamond. In my submission, I have no objection to Dr. Diamond's report being admitted, save for his reference to Dr. Betts, if that could be excluded from it. I'm not sure that it's entirely complimentary of the doctor, and her report won't be in evidence.
Yes, I understand. Mr. Morris, I think some of the cross-examination has gone into areas that probably raise some issues that need to be addressed by psychiatric reports. But I do agree with counsel assisting that if the report goes in, it should not include anything to do with the Betts report, and secondly that the reports that were tendered on the sentencing, all the reports should go in as well.
Yes, Your Honour. I think that's, in terms of the tender of the other reports, that was part of the material which Dr Diamond
Yes.
assessed, and we accept that.
Yes.
And, Your Honour, with respect to Betts, Your Honour will hear no argument to the contrary on the basis of that.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that...
Your Honour,
yes, Mr Maxwell.
I have a right to be, we haven't seen or been provided with the Dr Diamond report, so it's a bit hard for us to make any intelligent submission about it at all. But I have certainly an interest in this. And it may be that I wouldn't be raising any objection if I've got a right to raise an objection about it once I've had a chance to look at it. But certainly I would have objected to the Betts report, and that's not being pressed. But
Yes.
so it's just that we haven't been provided with it. That's all.
Yes. Ms Conneen, what do you...
Your Honour, I am acutely aware that there is only a scope for examination about the diaries, but insofar as there may be something about the diaries in the psychiatric reports, I would be assisted by being aware of what is in those reports. But as I understand the evidence, Dr Diamond doesn't discuss them.
No, he doesn't discuss the diary entries.
In any event, Your Honour, if it is possible for us to be served with the psychiatric report or any of them, reports or any of them, I would be obliged to.
Yes. Well,
Your Honour, it may be that when I see it, I'll just be able to send it
Yes.
without the inquiry being, I could just send an email saying I have no objection, or if I did, then it could be argued. But
yes. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll admit them all on the basis of reserving your right to object to it if you see a ground to. Having read all of the reports, quite frankly, I can't see that there's any basis for an objection to them. So we'll do it on that basis. So the tender is for...
the tender is for the expert report of Dr Diamond dated the 16th of April 2019.
Where we've got to AZ, we've double... what? BA. So BA for Dr Diamond.
Dr Bruce Westmore dated the 16th of June 2003.
BB.
Dr Yvonne Skinner dated the 22nd of January 2003.
BC.
And Dr Michael Jafrida dated the 27th of August 2003.
BD.
There are a number of other matters to be tendered, Your Honour, if now's a convenient time. I'm not sure if my friend has any other applications to make.
Well, before we pass by that, I'm just wondering, one of the changes that Dr Diamond introduces is that he comes to a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder was ruled out in the reports that were tendered before Justice Barr on the question of sentence. And it may be thought necessary to, I think Dr Westmore's deceased, Dr Jafrida, I'm not sure as to whether they should, or he should be provided with this updated report. That's an issue that might need to be looked at. And what's going through my mind, I have to say, is that the section of legislation dealing with inquiries talks about questions of guilt or sentence, and I'm not quite clear in my mind at the moment whether something would arise as to that as a result of the Diamond report. That's something everyone might think about once you've seen all the reports. And as I said, it raises the question as to, because the Diamond report's been given to the inquiry on the very last day for putting in any reports, so it raises the question about whether Dr. Giuffrida, for example, should be given the chance of saying what he thinks about it, or whether somebody else should be asked to look at it. On the other hand, because I hadn't looked at any of the sentencing material before the Diamond report came up, it seems to me that one view of it is that if you got to this point of looking at the sentence, all the facts that Dr. Diamond relied upon to come to his conclusion were facts that were known at the time of sentencing. So one argument would be that even though he's come up with a tag to be put on it, it would have no effect, but it might be argued that it does. So, I mean, they're the sort of parameters of the thinking about it all.
It's the case, Your Honour, that Dr. Diamond had access to far more recent material. To the extent it's material is one issue, but he certainly had access to Ms. Folbigg's prescribing history well past the trial and various other more recent documents. Again, whether it matters is another.
Yes. Well, I don't know, but it's just raises other issues for consideration, and people might like to think about that as to where it goes. But in the meantime, we've got the reports have been tendered subject only to any objections that might be raised. Yes.
Thank you. In addition, I tender an article that was referred to by Professor Hilton when he gave evidence concerning the detection of pyrogenic toxins of Staphylococcus aureus in sudden infant death syndrome. So I tender that article. It's a 1999 article.
BE.
The bundle of literature referred to in the hearing of evidence relevant to genetics, cardiology and neurology.
BF.
The statement of Craig Folbigg dated the 19th of April and the annexed death certificate. Your Honour will recall that I referred to that in evidence, but we didn't yet have the statement.
BG.
Your Honour will also recall that Ms. Folbigg was undergoing some cardiac testing during the course of a week of hearing, and I tendered the raw test results of the further cardiac testing dated the 18th of September.
GH.
Professor Skinner was provided with those results and provided a supplementary expert report dated the 24th of April 2019, which I tender.
BJ.
Professor Skinner provided a subsequent letter clarifying one particular potential diagnosis, that's CPVT, which there was a deal of evidence about. So I tender the letter from Professor Skinner dated the 30th of April 2019.
BK.
and I tender the report of Dr. Raju, who was the electrophysiologist who carried out the tests on the 18th of April, and his report's dated the 18th of April.
BL.
Now, Your Honour may recall that rather late in the day, those assisting Your Honour received a large bundle of material that had been held by legal aid, but after many weeks of tracking it down was ultimately held by Ms Folbigg's solicitors, and the summons was ultimately issued, and that large amount of material was located and provided to assist Your Honour's inquiry. And among that material was a letter from Dr. Drucker, and Your Honour will recall that Dr. Drucker's name came up in relation to genetics and other matters. And this is a report of his dated the 18th of February 2003 to legal aid, so clearly obtained on behalf of the defence. And I seek to tender that report. I don't know that there's any issue in it.
There's no issue about that, Your Honour.
BM.
So it's dated the 18th of February 2003. And finally, there were the two diary entries that my friend took the witness to in relation to Caleb this morning, dated the 24th of May and the 19th of July 1989. I tender those.
BN.
That completes the tender, Your Honour. There is the direction that Your Honour made on a previous occasion concerning submissions, and that was that council assisting submissions be served on the Friday the 17th of May 2019, and submissions from others with leave by Friday the 31st of May 2019. And I'm not suggesting that that be brought forward by 2.5 days, Your Honour. Unless, of course, my friend wishes their submissions to be brought forward by 2.5 days, to which I would not object.
2.5 weeks would be nicer.
I'll make that submission, Your Honour. I'd appreciate as much time as we've got. There's quite a deal of material.
Yes, okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. So far as...
I'm sorry, Your Honour, there's another issue that I take it that the tender's now closed of material. If there's anything that if there's anything that we wish to approach those instructing my learned friend, if there's anything from the documents that have been served upon us by the Crown Solicitor's Office that we feel ought to at least be considered whether they should be tendered or not, given the state of the evidence, could we at least have liberty to do so by, say, Wednesday? Whether that's not to suggest that it necessarily will be, but just that we may wish to advance some documents from the material that's been considered to at least be considered whether they ought to be tendered or not.
You're talking about documents and documentary exhibits?
They were documents that they may be. I suspect that if there's anything, it'll be coming from the 4 volumes of material from the CSO files that were served upon us back in November or December, if anything.
That's a long time to have had them and not be in a position to know.
Well, Your Honour, the fact is that we were not aware until what was going in and what wasn't up until now, and I just wish to reserve that position, Your Honour.
Okay. Well, I don't want you to be disadvantaged in any way.
We can do it by Monday if it's...
Yes, well, look, if we could leave it at that by Monday, and we can review it at that stage. What must not happen is to have another report from another expert coming in from left field that,
No, Your Honour.
yeah.
This is material that's been provided to us
Yes.
through the purpose, through the ambit of this inquiry, Your Honour.
And I think we can say, can't we, that we've now examined every biological, every physical, every
Such
aspect of things that could be.
that we've been able to, Your Honour, yeah.
Yes, yes. All right, thank you. Then we'll adjourn and we'll hear from you if there is anything
Thank you, Your Honour.
on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.